Forcing change doesn't work. In this video, I want to share the mechanics of change and how to go about making effective changes. Our mind can oversimplify this whole topic, and it'll think that if I just impose my will upon reality strong enough, then I will force something to change. But reality is actually very counterintuitive and complex. The moment you force yourself onto, let's say, a person, you simultaneously create a counter force, which will be their resistance. And in a very practical way, what does this look like? Think about a time when someone tried to force you to do something, and just what was your response to that? Probably one of resistance and a lack of receptivity, not really wanting to do it. So when you impose your will upon someone, this creates a counter will within the person that you're trying to change, for example. And in this video, I'm going to talk about change at in a more general way, not just with people, which I've talked about in the past. So I want you to get how counterintuitive that point is. Change doesn't work in this like 1 + 1 = 2 kind of way. Change is kind of messy. Change is more like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 3 steps forward, 3 steps back, 5 steps forward, 1 step back. It's more non-linear. It's not as simple and straightforward as our logical, linear-oriented minds would like it to be. This is kind of just how existence works. There's just opposing forces, right? There's masculine and feminine, up and down, left and right, here and there. So how do you really begin to actually make meaningful, effective, and lasting changes? I have a whole bunch of points that I actually want to talk about. I hope there's not mosquitoes biting me. The first one is flow with natural rhythms. This is going to involve learning how to access your intuition and feeling into the experience very deeply and really being in your body. So I'm getting this flow with natural rhythms point from Taoism, and not just Taoism as like a philosophy. I'm also getting it from personal experience. I've been meditating for like 7+ years, around 7 years really. I've done many meditation retreats, read hundreds of books, and it's just my natural psychology at this point to not just force a change because I just know it doesn't work. And that whole approach seems too aggressive, too forceful, and like it's just lacking in balance. So, oh my God, it's a little girl screaming. I hope she's okay. Oh my God, I can't bit my mosquitoes. So you want to allow change to actually happen in a natural and organic way. You actually want change to align with life. You want to feel the flow of life, and you don't want to force anything against it. You don't want to push anything against it. This is just not going to work. And a good way to really begin to get in touch with this point that I'm making is to actually practice meditation. Become aware of your feelings, your thoughts, your sensations. Actually become present. Accept your current state. Accept the current circumstances that you're in. Acceptance itself leads to change. It actually leads to a deeper and more meaningful and lasting change. There's just a little girl screaming at the top of her lungs continuously in a playful way. It's kind of distracting me. So when you're accepting something, your ability to change that thing actually increases because you're no longer forcing yourself against it. You're not creating the counter force. You're not imposing your will upon something or someone, so there's not a counter will, or at least there's less of a counter force or a counter will. This actually creates the space for organic and natural change, which can basically have deep, meaningful, and lasting effects. If you actually force a change, right, if you're successful, first of all, that change is going to be very short. It's not going to last very long. It's not deep and it's not meaningful. Right? Let's say you want to teach your kid, for example, how to develop self-discipline. Let's say they're like 15 years old, they're a teenager. You forcing them to do their homework isn't really going to teach them self-discipline. That's not self-discipline. That's just you enforcing, imposing yourself upon them in order to do homework in a way that's potentially threatening to the relationship you have with them, and you're not really respecting their autonomy very much either. And really, a better way to actually allow people to learn to discipline themselves is through gentle guidance, which is my next point, which also involves a respect for, let's say, that teenager's autonomy, their ability to make their own decisions. They have their own points of view, feelings, wants, needs, alignment, right? Taking these kinds of things into consideration, their own personality type, values, psychological temperaments, right? We're kind of getting into a lot more complexity here. So let's say you force your teenage son to do homework. First of all, this just isn't self-discipline. He's not disciplining himself. He's just doing it most likely out of fear of losing the attachment relationship, fear of losing love. What he actually wants is security and love in the connection. That's like the foundation of the connection. And natural consequences are actually a really good way to basically help people to learn self-discipline. So if people aren't on top of things, what are the consequences of that? Right? It can be quite painful in a lot of cases. And you can basically gently nudge people, gently guide them, rather than giving them just harsh measures. Right? You can just encourage change, right? And trying to share some lessons when people are also receptive to it, which is my next point, but we're not going to get that far yet. So you also want to create an environment that's also conducive to the change, because your environment matters quite a lot. You want to basically have a supportive environment, maybe one that's healthy, one that just removes distractions. You want to consciously evaluate your environment and shape it up in a way so that it is in alignment with your desired change. Now, to a more balanced approach of creating change. Right? So you need to actually be receptive to, let's say, a person if you're trying to change them. You need to balance both action, which is a very masculine force, with receptivity, which is a more feminine force. And you need to actually intuitively strike this balance. It's not as logical as our minds really like to say. And by actually balancing these forces, you create more well-being within the connections you have to people, within the systems that you interact with, within your own psychology and your own emotional system. So if you are just nothing but active, right, you come across as too forceful. Right? You're not really listening to people. You don't know their needs and their wants and what it feels like to be who they actually are. If you're too receptive, then you're not really guiding them in a direction that's conducive to their needs or to the needs of the situation. So it's not just people that we're talking about here, it's everything. So you actually need to integrate these forces. Next is patience. You actually need to just take time. You have to accept that change occurs very slowly. Look at human history. It's taken us quite a while to get to the point where we don't want to crucify each other for having different beliefs, and it still happens in a lot of parts of the world. So just accept that in order for things to truly change and evolve, it just takes time. Right? And you forcing yourself upon situations will only create more resistance. It only creates more problems. It creates more of a counterforce. So being persistent yet flexible and adapting your strategies as needed without forcing an outcome. This is basically what's needed. Next is small steps. If you want to have a large change, you need to break it down into something small and manageable. If you have a big steak, you don't eat that thing in one bite. You take things step by step so that it doesn't overwhelm the system or the person that you're interacting with. Because if you do too much change too fast, it's overwhelming and destabilizing. You want to avoid that. You want to care about the stability of the system or the person that you're interacting with, while also gently guiding them and actually caring about them in their desired direction, in the direction that actually matters for them, the direction that's healthy for them. So you want to break it down. You also want to determine where people are at. Where is the system at? What has to happen next, right? What actually has to happen next, not what I believe will happen next or needs to happen next. These are two different things. Next is intrinsic motivation. This is especially important for people. Does the change come from a very internal place? This is crucial, right? So just cultivating a genuine desire for change can make everything a lot smoother. And when someone doesn't have that intrinsic motivation, right, it's not really in alignment with them, at least not at the current time. You have to adapt to the present experience. You have to make sure that it's in alignment with the circumstances. Right? So if someone doesn't have the intrinsic motivation to make a change in their life, perhaps it's out of their value system, or it's just not really aligned with them for whatever reason during the present circumstances. Maybe in a year it is, maybe in a month, maybe in an hour. Who knows? Right? Depends on situation and the context and the person's needs, desires, all that kind of stuff. So intrinsic motivation is how you get that really deep, meaningful, and lasting change to occur, especially within people. An extrinsically motivated change isn't really deep, meaningful, and long-lasting. It's bound to collapse at some point and is out of alignment with the person themselves and their psychology, right? Which, you want to care about, I hope. Next is self-compassion. So if you're trying to change yourself, a lot of people can beat themselves up, think they're not doing enough, or just they'll subtly start to hate parts of themselves that don't want to change, right? There's parts of you that won't want to change. They're stuck and they want the security and just comfort, and they're not really trying to feel overthrown and destabilized. That's why I talked about you have to care about the stability of the person or the system that you're interacting with. Right? So being kind and compassionate towards these parts of you that can be resistant, right? Loving your own resistance, loving the parts of you that are wounded and are struggling with the change, right? Really giving them your full attention, right? I do an exercise with my clients where we visualize, imagine you had a newborn baby and it's in your arms, and you can just tell how much, you can really feel into it, really sense into how gentle you are holding the newborn baby and the kind of nurture and love that you have for it. Right? And then learning to give that nurture and love to yourself every single day, especially to the parts that you avoid and repress. Right? You want to give that kind of love to those specific parts of you. It'll make the whole process a lot easier, and you're not leaving things behind. It's not like you're forcing yourself in this, because it's dysfunctional. When you're just kind of leaving those parts of you behind, your body tenses, there's parts of you that aren't ready for something and they need to be addressed and reassured. There needs to be more stability for you, more love, more compassion, more acceptance, and then you can move forward. Acceptance is extremely important for actually making positive changes. Acceptance doesn't mean that you just allow anything to happen. Acceptance means you're not fighting against what is happening, and from that place you are more stable, clear, grounded, etc. Next, leverage support systems. Go to therapy. Surround yourself with supportive people, get a coach, seek guidance from people, get the help that you actually need. Buy books, courses, go out and actually meet people, right? You actually just want to leverage support. You want the maximum amount of help that you can get because, why wouldn't you, right? You want to learn the most that you can learn that is going to help you, right? And you want to be proactive about this. Moving on is make sure that the changes actually align with your values or the values of the system or the values of the person. So we're really digging into the internal, more unseen, less physical mechanics of change here. See, that's a common theme within everything that I've been saying in this video. We're looking at things like resistance and psychological mechanisms and defense mechanisms and acceptance. It's not like a forceful, unconscious, mechanical, gross, physical thing that I'm talking about here. It's more subtle, energetic, psychological, spiritual phenomena that I'm talking about in this video, right? You can't just hit someone over the head with a hammer, beat them into the change, right? It's just not how this one works. Right? If you want deep, meaningful, lasting change that comes from within, because that's where it has to come from if it's deep, meaningful, and lasting. Shout out to the intrinsic motivation point. Okay, so aligning with values. Basically ensure that the changes you seek are aligned with your core values if you're trying to change yourself, the core values of another person if you're trying to guide them and help them to change, or the goals and the values of the system if you're trying to help that system to change. Right? And this is also assuming that the core values of the system that you're trying to change are actually like functional and healthy. And even if you're trying to change an unhealthy system to something more evolved and conscious, you still have to care about the stability of that system. You got to do it. Right? You got to step back and kind of let go of your reactivity and your judgments and your potentially hatred for a system that you don't like. And you have to recognize that this system has a sort of homeostatic drive to it. It wants to survive and perpetuate itself and, keep living into the future. And that if you come and you start just disrupting it and you don't really understand systems thinking, you're actually going to cause more harm than good, even though your intentions are good. You will actually not help. So when changes resonate with, let's say, your deeper self, this is actually how you make the process feel authentic. This is how there is just less resistance to it. Right? Resistance is often reduced when something is really in alignment with us. Right? We can still feel it. We can feel it in the form of fear, for example. But it's like there's a sense of it feeling right, though. It's like deep down you got to do this. It fits you well. And usually the more important something is for our soul's journey, right, we can experience quite a lot of fear with that. Right? And apply what I'm saying into the right context. I'm not talking about the more scary something is, the more important it is for our soul's journey, because jumping off of a cliff is pretty scary. So I'm not talking about that. Right? Just apply what I'm saying into the right context. Right? Listen to it a few times and try and get the message I'm actually trying to give you, if you didn't get it. Same thing with, of course, other people or any system that you're trying to change. You need to have a grasp of these mechanics, and it has to actually be who you are so that you can make effective changes. Right? Without understanding the mechanics of change, you're going to inevitably bang your head up against walls over and over and over again. You're going to screw up your relationships. You're going to suffer, and you're not really going to know why. It's because there's underlying structural systemic things that you're unconscious of that are controlling everything, and you don't know how to interact and relate to them in a functional way so that things operate in a healthy way, so that things go smoothly. That's it for this video. You can apply for one-to-one coaching. I have it in the pinned comment and the description. I reserve my spots for the people who are the most sincere about raising their consciousness. Take it easy.